Haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihera. Welcome to our council meeting for the 5th of April. We welcome our public, we welcome staff, we welcome those who are joining us online. I would also like to remind people to please have your mobile phones on silent or turned off, and we will be having a next lunch break at 1 p.m. as well, so we'll continue on until then. I'd now like to invite Councillor Waru to please open up our hui with a karakia. Amen. Thank you very much, Councillor Waru. I call for any apologies. There do appear to be none. So we'll move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations required today? There appear to be none. Any urgent items that are not on this agenda? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago I put in a notice of motion with respect to staff providing a hard copy of council documents to elected members upon request. This is now the third agenda that the notice of motion hasn't appeared in the agenda. The first time, I recall the Chief Executive hadn't seen it in his inbox. The second time, there was a discussion about a conversation that I'd had with the Chief Executive. I haven't withdrawn the notice of motion, so I'm surprised that it's still not in the agenda.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Your notice of motion regarding printing and requiring and wishing to have printed copies of things has been addressed. We had confirmation verbally through the Chief Executive and staff, but I've also sent out to all councillors just a copy of the guidelines of printing policy. We did change quite a few years ago, almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, to going paperless to save costs to ratepayers and also to be more sustainable for the environment. So we do have Stella available, but the notice of motion as chairperson, I believe, is no longer required because the matter has been resolved, and that if you still wish to have printed copies, that those will be made available to you, and all you need to do is ask. So I consider that matter to be closed.
Point of order. I did receive your email yesterday, and thank you very much, and it does set out some instances when an elected member could ask for hard copy, whereas the notice of motion simply asks that hard copy be provided to elected members upon request. Specifically excluded from the email that you sent out yesterday is the provision of agendas. And so the notice of motion is broader than what you sent out yesterday, so I don't consider the matter closed. But more importantly, can I ask what standing order you would rely on for withdrawing a notice of motion?
As the chair, I have the right to decide whether to take notices of motion or not. I have indulged this conversation. It wouldn't normally be an urgent item to put onto agenda. Urgent items are usually council business. This is certainly an administration issue. Probably the reason for agendas not being included is these are made available through your Stella, but also you're able to print them. Yourself elected members are given allowance for printing and communications, for example, costs of phone calls, etc. So we'll move on with this. If you need further discussion, we can have that later, but it's not appropriate for us to continue discussing this at a council meeting.
Point of order. The role of the chair is to uphold the standing orders. My previous question was, which standing order are you relying on for effectively exercising a right of veto over a notice of motion.
Councillor Lee, that is not a point of order. Sorry, I have made the decision as chairperson. I would like to carry on with the very important council business that we have. If anybody does wish to have your printed copies, please just let council staff know ahead of time, and those will be provided to you. Were there any other urgent items not on the agenda? There appear to be none, so we'll move to confirmation of minutes. May I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the council meeting on 22nd of March be confirmed as true and correct? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Waru. Just checking if there were any corrections required. Nope. We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. And we move into our staff reports. We have the draft annual plan. We're on page 9 of your agendas. And may I please ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report or adopt draft annual plan 2023-24 be received. Moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Waru. All those in favour to receive the report, say aye. It's carried, and I now invite our DCEs Una Hopkins and Thomas Collet to overview this report and speak to a presentation.
Good morning, through you, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. So today we have before you the adoption of the draft annual plan budget, and subsequent to a decision that you make today, that will then set the wheels in motion for taking your draft annual plan out to the community for public consultation. So we were just going to take a little bit of time in this presentation to go back through the process and the decision-making steps that you have been through in order to develop your draft annual plan for 2023-24. I guess the journey for this annual plan looking at started back after the elections and looking at the direction that this council was preparing to take itself in on behalf of the community. So prior to Christmas, council set its priorities for the term, led out by 4 key priorities, of which everything the council has and is considering to do will be, I guess, screened and looked at against these priorities, and in making sure that delivery matches these and shows progress in these 4 areas. Those 4 priorities being housing and the community, looking at the delivery of core infrastructure and the economy. So if we just take a minute to reflect on what the annual plan is. The annual plan is a legislated piece of work that is required, and it has to be adopted by the 30th of June every year. It's a part of a cycle though. So what we are looking at here is the annual plan year 3. So it's the 3rd year of an existing long-term plan, and the long-term plan gets reviewed once every 3 years, and that opportunity to start looking at that long-term plan has effectively started with yourselves now in how the delivery of this year 3 may look, but in terms of conversations that you wish to have going forward and having a longer term view of things. There are a number of things that have to be required when you get to the point of adopting the final annual plan, and that is that the annual budget for the year has to be made available, along with a rates funding impact statement, and most importantly, the summary of any variations from the LTP. So that's quite a significant piece in that every variation to year 3 needs to be documented and explained in that final document. In terms of, sorry, I've pretty much already spoken to this one, and this one's just to give you a visual of that cycle. So where we are today is we're looking at where do you take your draft annual plan out in terms of this 3-year LTP cycle. In the course of looking at your draft annual plan development, there were a number of themes that came forward very clearly in a number of the forums and discussions amongst yourselves. That was that we were putting out a draft annual plan that was prudent. And that means in terms of looking at the rates increases, looking at the debt and looking at the CAPEX program. Also within taking your year 3 out to the community, it's about being able to show that there are deliverable, measurable results against the council priorities. But also that in looking at delivery, there's also a focus on your essential services and to do them really well. So this was an opportunity to look at the needs of the community versus the wants. And also there was a strong desire to look at driving alternative revenue sources, and that's a discussion around user pays versus the rates resilience or reliance that the Rotorua Lakes Council has on a funding stream. So, as I said, the process for, annual plan development did start well before Christmas, and I'll remind you about your Christmas reading packs, where every activity that this council delivers currently was provided to you so that you had a really clear picture of what that activity is, what its main objectives are, and how that activity is funded. That information and that understanding of all of those activities was then discussed by yourselves in the first forum. Starting off, we had a look at what the challenges are that RLC are facing at the moment, and in particular looking at the implications of inflation, looking at the vast capital works program that was in front of you, looking at the impacts of significant changes in assets as a result to revaluations, and the challenges around staffing costs. That forum also looked at if council continued to deliver in the same way as had been prescribed in the LTP for year 3, there would be a potential rates increase of 11.95%. And to get to that point, there had already been a number of assumptions that had been made. This 11.95% became the starting point, so stressing to yourselves that this was doing business exactly the same way as it had been intended in year 3. Within that doing things the same way, there was a capital program in the order of 160 million. And so that, due to carry forwards and some projects that may not be started in the current financial year, moving into next financial year, that was up 20 million from what was proposed in the 22-23 year. Also, if you were to complete that capital program in the order of 160 million, the council would need to look at taking on additional debt of 77 million. In that forum, every activity that you had been looking at in your Christmas reading pack was looked at, and you were able to give direction and some comments on whether those activities aligned directly to your priorities, and what, in terms of making those priorities and seeing progress in them, where do those activities currently align? And you gave us guidance on which of those activities at this point in time you wished to look at enhancing, where you looked at maybe making some reductions in those activities, or where you wished to stop some activities. And equally also to have a look at opportunities where activities could be funded differently. And so that comes back to one of those first themes around looking at alternative revenue sources. Based on that direction received in that forum, the organisation went away and took all of that information and had a look at the activities that were currently provided to yourselves, and came back to Council with 45 proposals where activities could be enhanced or reduced or stopped or funded differently. So you were given an idea and information and background on each of those proposals for you to consider further and to take all of that information away to come back into a decision making on where you wish to progress with that. I guess the key to those proposals was that each one of those proposals either looked at changing that 11.95% starting rates position. If you accepted a proposal, it would lower that rates increase. If you chose not to move ahead with one of those proposals, it would likely bump that rates increase up. And so we needed to see from you what an appetite was in terms of a rates increase going out to the community. So what did that look like? On the 22nd of March, you had a council meeting where you went through each of those 45 proposals and you made decisions on those proposals. Some you have accepted, and that has resulted in the lowering of the rates increase from looking at around 11.95% and taking that down to 7.2%. And some proposals you did not wish to proceed with at this time. So overall, what we have in terms of a position or a starting position at this point in time is based on those proposals and your decision making on the 22nd of March. Accepting proposals that were put forward to you lowered the potential rates increase to 7.2%. It broke the CapEx program down, and just from memory, that CapEx program is a little bit higher than what is shown on the graph there. I think it's in the order of 141, and the debt is 51. Sorry, so apologies, we didn't have an opportunity to update that graph. So that is where we are currently at, and I'm going to hand over now to Thomas Collet, who's just going to run through the impacts and the landing place of all of that on the draft annual plan budget.
Thank you, and good morning, Your Worship and councillors. With regards to the underlying numbers of the draft annual plan for consultation, so what we are seeing is, here is a summary of the breakdown of the revenues that are being sought. This does exclude capital revenues, so it does not include revenues that support some of our larger projects, in particular from Kānoa. And so what we are seeing is, as a whole, we still remain predominantly reliant on rates revenue to support our organisation. We are, as part of those proposals, targeting an increase in growth in some certain aspects of fees and charges, and looking forward to the community feedback on those. But as a whole, we remain consistent with previous years, where we do have a larger proportion of our revenue coming from rates and fees and charges. With regards to where our rates revenue is being applied, as a whole, predominantly it does support the majority of our infrastructure areas, sewerage and sewage, roading and footpaths, waste management, water supplies, and probably the district development component as well. A lot of those are from the targeted rates, and then some of the other activities such as stormwater, sports, recreation, and arts and culture are predominantly supported by general rates. With regards to the capital work program, while we are going out to the community with proposals to defer or stop some activity, the underlying program is still significant and still has a significant amount of investment back into the community. So just as a reminder of the three different categories of how we class our capital expenditure, growth is expenditure that supports the growth of the district with regards to either housing or commercial or industrial developments, and that's infrastructure needed to support either a new subdivision predominantly or infill. The majority of this expenditure that is in the plan is either supported by Crown Infrastructure Partnership funding, that's the CIP funded, which is supporting stormwater investment into the Wharenui estate, or alternatively is triggered when occurs when growth happens, and then is funded predominantly from development contributions. With regards to back at the top, level of service, that is where we have existing assets and infrastructure and where we are looking to improve them, whether it is seismically strengthening like the museum, whether it's introducing a new sewage scheme like Tarawera or Rotoiti Rotorua, or the big item there, which is upgrading of the wastewater treatment plant. And then thirdly, we have renewals, and so we are continuing to invest close to $40 million into the renewal of our existing infrastructure. You'll see that the aquatic centre there is broken down into two. There is an element of looking after the existing asset and maintaining it, and then also improving it. And as a whole, there is still a significant amount of investment into particular infrastructure renewals, but also parks and reserves and those sorts of elements. And predominantly that investment is funded by rates revenue. Our debt profile, we maintain the position against our debt limit, and then going forward with the reduction in the capital works program and the level of debt required, we do build a little bit of see an improvement in the gap between our current debt levels as a percentage to our debt limit. But as you're aware, there is significant investment ahead of us, in particular around the wastewater infrastructure, and we will see that that gap closing into the future. However, there is an opportunity also at the time of the long-term plan, which is coming up, to reset that. And then just lastly, following on from the decisions from a week or so ago with regards to the breakdown of the rate proposal of 7.2, we are having to say that it's an average because not all of our rate types are moving at the same percentage, and as a result, depending on the type of property that is being rated and the composition of that rates, each property will have a slightly different percentage. So what we are seeing underlying from the proposals is that the general rate is going to move by 5.3, water supply by 10, waste collection 4.5, sewage, which is the one that's seeing the most increase as a result of investment into the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and in particular around CPI adjustments of 17, and then the other urban sewage development rate and lakes enhancement rate, which predominantly support freshwater quality enhancements. So what is the impact of those? So a little bit smaller than I anticipated, sorry, councillors, but so what we do is we cluster, and we have a set of sample ratepayers that we've used for a number of years now, and we show the impact of that average rate increase across the business sector, the farming, the rural residential, and the residential area. As on the previous slide, there was a majority of that average increase was sitting in targeted rates for water and wastewater activities. What we are seeing, therefore, is when those rates are applied to properties, that's where the larger burden of that rate increase sits. And so as we see, that 7.2% falls on average as a 6.7 across our business sector, 5.02% across our farming sector. They predominantly only pick up the general rate and don't usually have those targeted rates. Rural residential is slightly higher at 5.7, and that is because a number of those rural residential properties are connected to water supplies and may also have sewage networks as well. And then with regards to residential, that does average out at 7.95. And what we are seeing in the residential area is that the lower capital value properties are picking up a slightly larger proportion of that as a percentage, not obviously as a dollar perspective, and that's a reflection of the increases in the targeted rates to wastewater and water because they do go through as fixed charges rather than on capital value. We have reviewed the impact of this a little bit wider, and so there are a couple of outliers with regards to these averages, and those outliers are predominantly hotels, particularly large hotels. They do pick up a large proportion of wastewater charges, and so we are seeing that they are sitting closer to the 10% as a result. And no doubt we will get feedback on the proposals going forward on that. So with that, happy to hand over back to Una, or happy to take questions at this point.
We go to Councillor Patterson, followed by Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Thomas and Una, for your presentation. Just got a couple of questions around the, firstly, let's deal with the process. You've mentioned the LTP and the annual plan. So looking at the annual plan and how that relates to this, to the LTP, I should say. So item 36, which was one of the items that we've voted to remove, which is active and engaged communities, stop sports fields facilities funding valued at 1.23 million of CapEx. So this same budget figure is listed on page 38 of the 2021-31 LTP as part of the 3-year Westbrook Sports and Recreation Precinct funding, which interestingly the year 4 figure, that's next year, is going to be 59 million. At a meeting we had last week, it was stated we can't remove an item from the LTP or it would trigger an amendment, which would be costly to the ratepayer. So how can we, I'm just clarifying, how can we remove that from the annual plan when it's in the LTP?
So the annual plan allows us to amend year 3, which is what we're looking at. And so we are therefore going out. So the council has made a decision to propose removing that investment of $1.2 million. And we are therefore going out and consulting on that as part of our annual plan for year 3.
Right.
If the council wishes to amend items further out into the LTP, then that would require consultation with the community, but is outside of the scope of this process, which is just focusing on year 3.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Supplementary. Just with the rates, or should I say the debt. So council debt is forecast to be 181% with this new strategy if we vote for it today. Yet the LTP says it's expected to rise to 246% through years 25-26, which is rather scarily close to our debt ceiling, which is an increase, if we vote for what we're looking at today, of 65% in debt in the next 2 years. So the items that we've deferred, that we've taken out because we said we don't want to put that on the ratepayer this year, and deferred them into years 24, 25, is that going, or should I say 23, 24, is that going to add to that debt ceiling pressure?
So, Councillor, these items are already included into that figure that you mentioned of the trajectory of where the LTP is heading. Obviously, when council make decisions during the year, that can move up and down. What I would say, councillor, is that for this year in particular, as I showed before, we would plan to take on less debt. As soon as this council in June adopts an annual plan, we start right into the process of starting a new long-term plan. And so with regards to those, the trajectory of our debt moving to 244%, council has the opportunity to reset all of that based on your priorities by doing a new LTP. And that LTP year 1 would cover the year that you are mentioning.
Right, thank you very much for that.
And just to confirm, that process will likely begin in July as well, the long-term plan process. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've come up with a number, 7.2%. We recognise that and we've landed there through the process. But I'm not sure how we end up with this water supply connection charge and the sewage connection charge, which consequently distorts, as you talked about with the hotels. How does that, can you give us a little more explanation of that? Because I feel that's not quite where I thought we were going.
Yep, certainly, Councillor. So we've always talked about the average rate increase, and so we always talk about the total percentage movement of our rates income, which is 7.2%. But just remembering that our rates revenue and our rates are collected via, I think, 20 different rates. General rate, targeted rates for water and all the rest. And each of those rates funds an activity, and so each of those rates has to move based on the underlying cost pressures of that activity. And so while we've talked globally, what we have seen is what we talked about is that we have seen, as an example, on the sewerage component, CPI challenges that we're facing, but also we're seeing a significant investment into the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant, and so those are combining to a 17% increase for that activity alone. With regards to waste collection, we're not seeing the same level of cost pressure in that area, and so that the cost pressures there are only requiring a 4.5% increase. And so each of our activities has a funding policy. Some of them have individual targeted rates, and so what we do is we combine them all together to talk about an average rate increase. It is, I would say, a little unusual for us to have such significant deviation as this, but that's probably a reflection of the work that's being undertaken and the cost pressures in some of those individual areas.
Sorry, just to add on to that, are those fixed in your view, or can they be manipulated?
When you say manipulated, as in...
Perhaps further to that question, as this is a proposed consultation document, when and if we get feedback on that item or any other item, Council is still to make a final decision. So when that returns, would that be an opportunity to look at, would there be any flexibility in particular items, although they may have a specific rates charge allocated to them?
There's no real ability to transfer costs between activities in which they are funded. So in saying that, based on feedback and whether you wish to amend levels of service or so forth, there is an ability to look at those then, yes. What we have done is we've tried within our best counsel with regards to our sample ratepayers of understanding how it falls. And within the tools available to ourselves, within our rating framework, we have tried to deliver it with the most equitable distribution that we can at the moment.
Sorry, I was just checking, I believe we have had specific rates for emissions in the past under certain circumstances, for example with farming in the past too. So we'll look to explore that if it comes up. Yep. We have Councillor Kai Fong. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, Thomas, for the ratepayers. So we've come to a figure of 7.2% on average, and we've got a plan where Council has looked at enhancing, reducing, stopping or funding things differently. So for the community going forward, if they're not happy with 7.2% or they're not happy with things that we've cut, is it approximately $1.2 million worth of expenditure for a 1% rates rise or reduction?
That is correct, Councillor, yes. So
the community needs to be mindful that if they want things put back in, then the rates will need to go up, or if we cut things, we need to cut things further if people are not happy with 7.2. Thank you.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Thomas and Una, for the report. I've got a question later on when we go further into the presentation, but just for this one, last triennium we discussed about the UAGC, and I think just for sake of clarity and potentially for the benefit of some of the members around the table, would you be able to talk a little bit about that, and if potentially later further down the track that would be looked at as well?
So thank you, Councillor. Within this proposal, the UAGC has not moved, so that has been held. Part of the reason was just being very consistent with previous years, and also to help with affordability and distribution, in particular around the lower capital value properties in our districts. However, if council wishes to increase the UAGC by the same rate as the general rate or different, then the council can do that as well, subject to if you have any feedback on that. So you do have the ability to amend that going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, followed by Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry, just one more supplementary for clarification for those, especially for those watching. The 2021-2031 LTP stated the rates for this year was projected to be 4.5%. Then the Year 2 delivery presentation document said 4.5%, which was released on the 22nd of March. And then it was reinforced with the discussion document, which was put out, also saying 4.5% on page 26. So then on the 15th of February, we were informed that if council is to deliver as proposed in Year 3 of the long-term plan, a rates increase of 11.95% would be required. So that's a jump of 7.45%, which actually equates to about 165% increase. Can you explain how business as usual costs almost tripled?
Certainly, Councillor. So at the time of the LTP, when we created it, I think back in 2020, New Zealand and the world was experiencing its lowest inflationary aspect known, and we were tracking, I think, at 0 or 1%. And within the assumptions of that long-term plan, we'd assumed no inflation for the first 2 years, and then built in, I think, a very low inflation number into Year 3. And as we know at the moment, that is now sitting at 7.2. So you could imagine, therefore, that the 6% of that difference you just mentioned is just in the underlying inflation assumption that we've had to apply.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the 22nd of March, Council met in a confidential session and considered 45 options for the annual plan. Has the minutes for that meeting been released as yet?
As noted at the council meeting, those will be released on the 11th of April, which is when the consultation document will go out and the consultation will begin.
Okay, thank you for that. So council voted in favour of some of those, and the items that we voted against on that occasion, are they listed in the annual plan or mentioned in the annual plan?
No, they're not, Councillor, because the consultation document focuses on deviation from Year 3, and so therefore those items you elected not to progress are what were already discussed in the long-term plan. Yep.
Is there any scope for the public to review the minutes of the 22nd of March and make a submission that perhaps we should have decided some issues differently?
So I can answer the first part, and perhaps Una could answer the submissions part. Usually there will be, in the past there have been council workshops. We utilise them as forums. We had the 2 forums, but then to ensure transparency, when a decision was required, instead of doing that in a workshop or forum setting, we then made that a formal council meeting. Now, the reason for doing so is that, yes, the minutes, including everything that was proposed, or 45 proposals, would be shared, and it would show whether that was supported or not, whether it was carried or not. And so all 45 proposals will be available to view in those minutes on the 11th of April.
Thank you. The second part of my question was, is it open to the public to make a submission on some of the items that we considered on the 22nd of March that weren't progressed into the annual plan?
Through you, Your Worship. With the, I guess, the release of the confidential minutes, which will happen on the 11th alongside the consultation document, a member of the community will be able to come to a conclusion themselves about how those decisions on the 26th look against the proposal that is going out. And yes, if they felt that there was a proposal or any other suggestion the community may have in terms of what they wish to put forward to the council, then they could put a submission in.
Thank you very much.
Were there any further questions? There do appear to be none, so we'll let Una carry on with the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've just got a couple of slides that, following your decision today, what the consultation process will look like. So consultation based on your decision will open up on the 11th of April, and following your decisions today, a consultation document will be finalised and published as part of that. So in terms of, I guess, our theme or our objective behind the consultation process, we are looking to actively engage with our community about Council's draft annual plan, wishing to meet people where they are, also being digital and in person. So in terms of looking at digital engagement, like all of our major pieces of consultation that Council goes through, we utilise our engagement platform called Let's Talk Korero Mai, and so information will be available on that from the 11th. In Let's Talk, there's an opportunity for the community to read the consultation document and also to have a look at the proposals and to provide feedback in that way. Let's Talk is also a good portal for the community to ask questions, which we can then post back to the community on any of the elements that are in the consultation document. Council will also be using and utilising significantly our Facebook channels, and we will accept submissions or comments via Facebook. The one exception with that is when people are posting comments or submission pieces of items through Facebook, we can't acknowledge that we've received that like we do with similar written pieces of submission. So that's just a little bit of a difference there. We are also utilising other groups' Facebook channels because that is a really good way of being able to reach the community. So we've got a really good network of groups that we work with who will be sharing content as well. And so that makes that digital reach much wider than just on our own Facebook channels. We also have a significant email database of groups, people, individuals who will also receive information about the consultation opening, key themes and where they can go to get more information. We'll also be utilising our e-Pānui, LinkedIn and also Te Arawa FM and their online channels. In terms of print, we've got the Weekender, which is a really good publication that goes very widely, a free newspaper to all households. There is the consultation document that will be available in a number of council locations and able to be provided to yourselves for you to take out to your connections and community groups as well. There's also, the timing with this works in nicely with the latest rates instalment that will be going out. So there will be a little information pamphlet that goes in the rates instalment invoice around the opening up of consultation on your draft LTP, draft annual plan. And face-to-face. So face-to-face is an important part of yourselves, engaging with the community on what your draft annual plan proposals are all about. We have a number of different and varying options for face-to-face. We are looking at some drop-in centres, and so we've got the library, the lakefront and up at Te Oho Mai for those. There's also some dedicated meetings that are being set up in various parts of the community, and there's an opportunity for people to come in, talk to you and provide verbal feedback. We are also going to a number of community group meetings, so their meetings, so going to them, where we have effectively a spot on their agenda where the proposal, that draft annual plan, can be presented to the community that way. We've also got a number of forums scheduled, and these will be coming out in your calendar appointments very shortly. We've got one set up for conversations with the community boards and also with Te Tātou. And lastly, but not leastly, the opportunity for the community to come in and actually speak to yourself in a formal hearings process. We're actually looking at providing a number of opportunities for this this time round, setting aside a full day. So there's the option for people if they wish to come in the morning or the afternoon, opening up an opportunity to come in the evening, but also to have an opportunity of people to effectively just drop in and give a verbal submission. The way previous hearings have been run is that only if you provide a written submission are you able to come in and present a verbal submission. And we want to offer the opportunity for a member of the community to just come in and talk to you on a one-on-one if they so chose to do that. In terms of the annual plan milestones, so upon your decision today, we will look to finalise the consultation document, look to finalise collateral, proceed with all of the advertising spaces that we've got lined up, and look to open up consultation on the 11th of April. Consultation will be open for a month, so closing on the 12th of May, and then we would go into a hearings process towards the end of May. All the feedback that is received on all of the different channels, including written, including Facebook, including the hearings, is collated for yourselves and provided to you, alongside a number of decision-making reports. So that will summarise the feedback so that you understand where the community are sitting in terms of the proposals that you're being put forward, and you will make some decisions on those on the 8th of June, which will then drive what a final annual plan will look like. And as we talked about right at the beginning, we've got a statutory deadline of adopting an annual plan by the 30th of June, and we have a council meeting on the 28th, so that we would be looking to get a decision from you on what your final annual plan looks like. So that's the end of my presentation around the consultation period. We're happy to take any further questions.
Are there any questions on the consultation? I do want to note that I'm really pleased that Facebook has also been an option. We know for some in the community, social media is becoming their main form of communication, so good to see us changing with the times too. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura, tēnā kōrua. Una, Thomas, thank you for the presentation. I'm happy where we've landed, and I know you've done a lot of hard work to get us here. But I just want to ask a question around and I think you might have answered it, but I might have not quite have got it, around the ability for, once this is put out into the public, the ability for the public to actually put in a kōrero about something not even in the annual plan proposal. Is that correct?
You are consulting through this process on proposals. So effectively what you are looking for is in your consultation document, you as the council have made or set a position, I guess, and you are asking for feedback on that. We do always get feedback through a submission process on proposals, on items that aren't directly related to the piece of I guess the topics that you're actually consulting on. There are a number of ways that we can address those. There will be things like directing those questions and queries into the organisation through a request for service, because sometimes we get things that can actually be dealt with operationally and we can push those off in that direction. Other things may be part of a wider conversation which may go into the LTP, or there may be some significant things where may have a potential impact on what you are looking at in year 3. So there's a number of different ways of dealing with it depending on how it comes in, and we would bring that to you.
Thank you. And I suppose just going on the corridor you had before, or it might have been Thomas actually, around the that this proposal is based really on any deviation from the year 3 LTP plan, right? Thank you for that. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Una, for the presentation. My question was just around, I think it's really great to hear that we're opening the hearing process for people who haven't made a written submission. I've heard some comments in the past about the difficulty, or I guess the complexity of making a submission. People who don't normally make a submission, and how they've often found it quite difficult to navigate the language, the actual layout and everything of that process. And so I guess my question is around how would we make it potentially just easier and more user-friendly for our people in our community to be able to make a submission, whether or not it be on a singular issue or as a whole.
Through you, Your Worship. I guess that's why we're trying to look at a number of different mechanisms for providing feedback. So hearings are one way that you can do that. And yes, you're right, we have had feedback over multiple years that members of the community find coming in and sitting in front of yourselves in a situation like this very daunting for them. So having opportunities where we have open homes or drop-ins where people can come in and provide feedback that way is an option and a channel that people can use. And we have also recently put up on our website also the guidelines to making a submission. So we are trying always to help people in terms of making a submission, but we also feel the opportunity for people to come in and give a verbal submission, and we're trialling it, coming into this environment to give a verbal submission. We hope that that will help also. And
just a quick supplementary question. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the past we used to have you might call them like submission stations or information stations around the area, particularly in Te Akamori, and obviously in our foyer down there. Would that be continued on this time around?
So it would be a similar format, a little different. This is where I think we've talked about, we're calling them open homes. So in those setups, there will be the opportunity for information there to be shared around the different proposals and opportunities to talk to yourselves and staff around what those look like. Yeah. I think you're referring to our world cafes. So they also have a place. We're not offering those at the moment for this particular round of annual plan, purely I guess because of the number of proposals that are actually in this consultation. And it's nice to kind of have a bit of variety in the different channels. So we may look at world cafes again, let's say for the long-term plan.
Councillor Kiriopa.
Kia ora, thank you through the chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have one question, and it's relating to my experience of engagement with iwi through the workshop process that was held at Te Akamori in relation to Plan Change 9. And at the time, a number of us went along to talk about the impacts of Plan Change 9 on our existing Māori communities, and a third of the time was taken up by somebody giving a presentation about how they were able to put a small home on their family land, and it wasn't actually relevant to what we needed to know about the impacts of Plan Change 9 on our communities. And I just wondered, my question is, with council staff, the engagement with iwi on this annual plan, I mean, I plan to support and be there as often as possible, but is there any process where council staff or the appropriate council staff with appropriate knowledge of Māori communities, of Taurua communities particularly, that the right staff are put into engagement and they've got the right knowledge to be able to address questions relating to the annual plan that are specific to our Māori communities? I ask this because I can imagine, you know, the average wage of Taurua is $22,000 per year. That's majority of our people. Rates increases for any reason will always, the ability of our families to pay for rates, the intergenerational experiences of our families being rated off their lands, those questions will always come up, undoubtedly. Is there a process where council staff are prepared for those, that people with the appropriate understandings of those things are put into the spaces where they're going to be engaging with iwi?
I guess in terms of looking at the overall engagement plan, within my team, I've got members that I believe have already reached out to you to see how we may be able to better look at that. Plus, we also lean in heavily on Gina's team to make sure that when we are in communities with iwi, that we do have people there that can connect with the issues. Not sure, just looking over at Gina, whether she wishes to add anything to that.
It's not. The only thing I would add is that just in terms of the impact of rates, there are processes, and my team works very closely with the rating team for supporting Māori landowners and Māori ratepayers to access some of the grants that are available for people who are on fixed incomes and, for example, pensioners and so forth. So there are processes for discounts and for lowering the rate impact on people who can't afford rates. And so my team also, in addition to supporting engagement, they also work directly with Māori ratepayers to support that as well.
We have Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Patterson and Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Una, for your presentations and reports. Could I just ask, Una, on the very last page of your presentation after questions, which I believe should be available. Sorry, and the last page at the bottom there.
Should we perhaps wait until we finish any questions with consultation and then we can get to the
I'm
final?
happy to be guided either way, Your Worship.
Let's do that. Sorry,
Cool,
there's one more slide left in it, but we'll carry on with questions on consultation. Councillor Patterson, followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks again for highlighting the consultation plan. I'm really impressed, as per Fisher's comments, Councillor Wang's comments, about the drop-ins and all the new things that you've added to it. I think that'll provide that personal opportunity for people who are nervous about appearing in this environment. The one thing I'm concerned about in our priorities, it says authentic engagement and communication. So I had a look at how we handled, or Council approached the last year's, which wasn't consultation, it was engagement, because there was no variation from the LTP. And then I looked at the structure for this. Last year was 4 weeks. This one is 5, so that's a tick. It's much more important. But it seemed like we were doing similar things, even though there are a few variations to it and a few innovations. One thing that has been raised, particularly by Councillor Kiriopa and myself, is about connecting with people who are not even on the same wavelength as us. You know, they don't read the papers, they don't listen to Te Arawa, they're not in our spheres. How are we going to reach them? Have we given any consideration, particularly our rangatahi, about talking to people like Wawatia? Not trying to push business your son's direction here, Trevor, but they've won awards for communicating things like, I believe it was prostate cancer checks with Māori that actually worked. They had actual results from it. They know how to do things and communicate with certain parts of the community that we may not. People like Digital Natives, former representative from Te Tautau Portala, his crew know how to talk to those people. Have we given any thought to expanding how communication platforms to include those people?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, we have. I guess the challenge for us is we've got a specific kaupapa here, which is effectively your variations to Year 3. We also have the challenge of resourcing and cost. So we do have to make a way up between channels that we know and use versus the opportunities to really expand into some newer channels or different ways of doing things. We need to grow and expand that, but we can't do it all at once with what we've got in the time frame that we've got. It would be really great going into the long-term plan where you've got a much longer and wider opportunity to talk to our community to look at things that you are discussing and bringing forward. So I think we've got opportunities to have some further conversations about that going forward. At the moment, we've had to look at what we can do within the constraints of what we've got, and then hopefully we can build on that going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Couple of questions, Una, regarding the consultation. May the 12th is the final cut-off time for the consultation. How are we going to treat some who have missed the deadline, are late? I know we've been a bit more relaxed sometimes in the past for people who have missed the deadline. That's one question. And the other one is, during the hearing period, are we going to allow some to come through by Zoom and give them the opportunity? Just a couple of questions there.
Through you, Your Worship, in terms of the deadline date, we always do tend to get the odd one or two that come in after the fact. If they are only a day or so late, they can easily be included into the packs, the decision-making packs. Often we may get groups that make contact with us and just say, hey, we're going to be a little bit late, is it all right? And we'll say yes. Any longer than a day or 2 or 3 then runs into you as councillors not being able to have all of the information in order to go into that next stage of decision making following the submissions. I've forgotten what the other question was. Oh yes, that will be available. Yep.
Thank you. Were there any further questions? There appear to be none. So the final PowerPoint slide?
Through you, Your Worship, that slide was only there if there was any conversation that came from the floor. I wasn't intending on speaking to that one.
Okay, so you had a question, Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm happy for either Thomas or Mr Williams or Ms Hopkins to intervene or make commentary. One of the things, 2 of the items there that we that apparently were considered but not progressed with. The very first one, if I could raise, would be the Airbnb. Now, for the last two elections, many in the accommodation sector have raised the unfairness about the lack of contribution, a wide contribution across the entire sector. And as Airbnb becomes more popular and has become a bigger market share, I'm not quite sure on if equity and economic resilience in these difficult times is part of our, one of our values. How are we letting this potential revenue, to me, we should be trying to grow our revenue base. And I think there's at least one option with the Airbnbs on an equity front as well as a revenue basis. So I think I'll leave it at that if I may. Thank you.
So, councillors, you'll be aware that these were proposals that were considered and in your decision making were decided not to progress. At this stage, if you wish to progress them, it would have an impact with regards to the timelines and the things that we were discussed.
Thomas is correct in the advice that he's just provided. The only other alternative is to actually include a general comment about consideration in the LTP as opposed to a specific opportunity. So rather than put a proposal forward, you could actually seek people's views on the matter that you're raising.
And just to further clarify, so it could be possible, as an example, to provide a line or just noting within the annual plan due to the time frames, and of course it wasn't progressed through to the final document though. However, I would suggest that we've missed the boat for the annual plan. However, there is the opportunity to explore it further in the long-term plan from July, and there is also the opportunity to explore it further as a separate paper to a committee or to a meeting of council. I would suggest that the latter would be the preferred, as it would also allow staff enough time to be able to return to us with a robust proposal, and of course not necessarily a business case, but with some confirmed figures that we can consider on what the expected revenue could be and at what time we could implement, whether it's a targeted rate or an increase specifically for Airbnb.
Thank you, Worship. I'm happy to follow your lead on that. Thank you.
Were there any further questions to any of the presentation items today before we close off? There do appear to be none. I will put the motion and then open up if there are any final comments before we vote on it and then conclude. So I ask for a mover and a move by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Lee, that the Council approve to go to public consultation from 11th of April to 12th of May based on a proposed rates increase of 7.2%, a capital works program of $141 million and borrowing of $51 million. That's been moved and seconded. I now open that up for any comments or discussion. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. As the mover of the motion, I'm happy to speak to it in support. We've been through a fairly rigorous process as councillors in terms of workshops, all the information that's been provided. It's been done over many, many months. We have gone and worked out needs and wants. We've screened that against the priorities that we set as councillors, and we've already started a work program against those priorities. We have all said that we did not want business as usual, that we wanted to make some changes. We wanted to take this council in a new direction, and that work has already started. And so therefore 11.95% was not going to be palatable to the community or to us. We haven't missed anything. We've looked at all of the OPEX options, the debt options, the CAPEX, and we have come up with a plan to cover the current economic times. And you know, it wasn't proposed 3 years ago that we would be looking at the economic situation that we're currently in with inflation, staff costs, and all the other inflationary pressures that each and every individual in this community is facing. So I think it's about having some hard conversations with the community. We've done the best that we can to try and reduce that rates rise as much as possible. But it is going to mean some hard discussions within the community, because whilst there are some things that we can enhance and look for revenue options, there are also some things that we need to cut if we are to go back to a rates increase of 7.2 instead of a double-digit number. So I think that we also need to be mindful that we are weighing up what we're doing for the community today who are suffering from severe economic circumstances, but also making sure that we are investing for the future, because there are some things that have a long-term impact and we cannot slow down our community or by not investing in those long-term capital projects. So I think it was important that I did ask that question about what the impact was of a 1% rates rise or decrease. It's $1.2 million worth of spending. So pay more in terms of your rates. We do more. Pay less, then obviously we need to make those hard decisions about what services and projects that we do not proceed with in this next financial year. So my plea would just simply be to the community, please make submissions on all of the items that are of interest to you. The Council is very interested in hearing your opinions on each of those line items. As I say, we've had a rigorous debate amongst ourselves around each of those items, but we look forward to hearing from the general community in terms of the submissions that they wish to make around where they see that rates rise should sit, the Capital Works program and the borrowing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would 100% echo what Councillor Kaifong has just said. We've worked hard on this. We've had to make some difficult decisions and it hasn't been easy. I'd like to give credit where credit is due to Una, and there's obviously a lot of thought gone into the engagement plan. I'm a stickler for public consultation, and what has been prepared sounds like the public will have more than ample opportunity to have their input. I think I can speak on behalf of the other councillors that not all of us are 100% happy with all of what we've proposed, and I expect that there will be changes made to the annual plan. This is not predetermined in any way, shape or form, and the challenge is there to the community to feed back to us what you think is good about what we've come up with and what you don't like so much, and there will be some and some. So please get involved, public, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following on from those comments, I would say, you know, again, it's never an easy decision setting a rate or a proposal for a number. It often draws a lot of controversy sometimes, but you know, council is facing similar issues that many businesses and many in our community are facing as well. And often it comes down for us to balance the costs and benefits for our community, but also bearing in mind the importance of investment, both investment into our community and into our future, but also how we attract that investment for Rotorua as well. I will signal that I will be voting in support of the draft annual plan to go out to public consultation. However, I do have some concerns with certain proposals and certain points within what we have discussed. And I think, you know, we have looked over the numbers and we focused heavily on the numbers, but often what we don't see until it's already been implemented is the impact it has on the people and on our community. And so I do hope that when it comes to, after we get the submissions and after public consultation, that when we make that decision, that we do think not just about where we are right now, but also about where we are in the future, and that we do not make those short-term decisions that will have those very long-term consequences. And the reason I'm supporting this is because I really want to hear from our community on how some of these proposals and what we have worked through. And I really want to thank all the elected members and staff who have put so much effort into this plan and trying to improve our situation. And that's why, like I said, I'm supporting this so that we can hear from our community directly. And thank you to Una before about trying to look at those new ways and how we can improve that engagement with our community, particularly with the rangatahi, which I really support as well. But I really look forward to hearing from the community how some of these decisions will impact them and potentially what could positively impact them too. And I think I'll just leave it at there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments before we close this? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. While I agree with a lot of what has been said today, I've got to state that I'm really concerned about the level of rate increase proposed in this annual plan. While this document does recognise that this is not a business as usual time, I don't believe it actually reflects that. Our community is facing enormous pressure from this cost of living crisis. We've all heard this before. So just to emphasise that, according to Credit Bureau Centrix, they seem to know what they're talking about, mortgage arrears rose 23% in February, the highest since COVID. Unsecured personal loans, that's the likes of those loan sharks, that's gone up by 9.2%, which is the highest since 2017. Westpac's acting chief economist stated, and I'll just read this quote, "The average household could see their fortnightly mortgage payments rise by $500. Renters, who we are all hearing are struggling out there, they will suffer those increases as passed on by landlords. They have no choice." One Roof, another reputable organisation, figures for 3 months to February showed Rotorua property values dropped by an average of $15,000. So that's here in our own backyard. Globally, we've had the recent collapses and bailouts of banks in the US and Europe, which has only added to the instability. And then yesterday, our friends in the Middle East of OPEC revealed that they are going to be restricting supply, which would result in a 40 cent per litre increase by August. So we want to compound that with a 7.2% rate increase. The mind boggles. And that's actually 8% according to that up there, close to 8% for urban people, the ones who are the poorest. Now, I know of an older lady, I've told you this before, but I'll say it again. She lives alone. She already spends 17% of her entire weekly income on rates. Now, NIWA is predicting that this winter is going to be the coldest in 3 years. So how is she supposed to heat her home, feed herself and pay her bills? I feel the options put before us were cherry-picked and really, frankly, didn't go far enough to achieve the savings that we should have done. I've heard concerns from our business community that too much ratepayer money is being spent on this organisation and not on deliverables. So, things like why wasn't Council's 49% share in Mountain Bike Events Limited given to us as an option for selling? What business have we got having 49% of a private company? Why
we have
wasn't
$132 million economic benefit to
I'm
this
not
district,
arguing that, but we could sell that and somebody else could have it.
Specific to the annual plan, Councillor.
What about the $11 million in council assets earmarked for sale in the 2021 LTP? What's happening with them? Now, I feel we should have done better for our people, and I apologise to the community wholeheartedly that I didn't do anything about it till it was too late. Thank you.
Thank you for your interesting perspective, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As our recent meeting, when we went through all of these, 11 of us, I'm only one, you're only one as well, Don, but collectively We met from 9:30 in the morning till 6 p.m. that evening, going over 45 proposals. We debated things, we discussed things, we won some things, we lost some things, and didn't even know till the end of that day what the rate was going to be. But we were mindful of where we had a starting figure, and it was 11.95, if I recall, something like that. So yeah, we had the hard decisions, and like what Councillor Wang says, we all agree, let it go out for consultation and see what our public do say to us. And if we have to bring it down even further, or some who say, come on, make some progress, we have to listen. So coming up, we'll have the hard call whether it is the final rate or whether it is going to rise or fall. But for me, I'm looking forward to hear what the community has to say. But I think it's been a good process. Thank you, Una. I think if I can give a bouquet to our admin staff, it wasn't easy because there were still some of us, and even though that I've been around this table a long time, I'm still learning. There were some things in the during the workshops and the forums that even I was still learning. So with that, I'll be supporting the motion that it go out for consultation, and we'll see when we do the final rates, the final percentage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura, o tira tātou katoa. Ki ngā kaimahi, kia ora rā koutou. Thanks for coming along to this tēnei hui. O tira, e tautoko ana i te kaupapa nei, so I support the move to go into consultation. I do acknowledge the kōrero. Yes, there's some things there that maybe some of us are happy about, some of us not happy about, but this was the whole point of having the debate and having that kōrero, so we get a good, robust process. I believe that we did have a good, robust process, and in the end of the day, it's going to go out. It's going to go out to the community. They're going to let us know if we're on the right track or not. Regardless, it's for us to make sure we follow that process. So I think, like I said already, to Una and her team and ki ngā DCEs katoa, not an easy task we set for you to come up with a plan for, and we're at this point now. No one likes to pay more than what they're paying. The only thing is, everything's gone up, including costs to council. So it's a bit of a hard one to say, oh, well, we will keep our costs down when in reality, from an operational point of view, it just can't happen. Everything's got to go up, and we've got to just find that balance where we can kind of make it work for everybody. Nā reira, koina noho tāku. Also, in part of the engagement kōrero that was had, Una, just want to make sure we do have a partner called Te Tatau. Don't be afraid to go there and use those kōrero too, because we are a partner. Nā reira, koina noho tāku, e tautoko ana i te kaupapa nei, kia ora tātou.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship, through the Chair. I'd just like to say, with the heaviest of hearts, I'm going to support this going out to consultation, but I do make it very clear, as I have made statements before, I do believe the 7.2 is far too high. During the election, I met people who were saying that they are making choices between eating or having the heating on. This cost of living crisis is not any fault to do with council, but unfortunately we have to adapt, and personally I don't think the cuts have been made hard enough or long enough. I salute all our team and all the DCs and all the hard work that their members have put in. This has been a very tough process, and I salute them. My only concern would be that I think it probably should have started earlier. I think we probably could have been starting on this in late January myself, but it is what it is. and we just have to live with it. As I say, I would hope that our leadership team, and I've reached out to the Chief Executive previously about approaching whether there would be further cuts possible amongst the team, amongst his executive team. He's declined that, which I understand, that's fine. But I would urge our leadership team to keep looking for further cuts to try and get that number down as close to 6% as possible. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the public for being and staff for being here today to listen to this, and I hope that as we move to take this out to public consultation that the rest of the community engages fully with it as well, so that we can get the feedback that we need to fully inform the decision that we make at the end of this to set our rate. It has been, as everyone said, a really difficult process, but the discussion has been robust, and I want to thank the council staff very much for their leading us through the process and giving us the most opportunities to have this robust conversation so we can make good decisions. They're not perfect. They will be informed, the final decisions will be informed by the public, and I look forward to hearing from their feedback, and I hope that we can take that strongly into account when we make our final decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, we've had a really good round of discussion. Thank you very much to the councillors for sharing your views. I think it is good for our community to see that there is a diversity in the views. However, the one thing that is true and consistent is that we are all working hard to do our best for the people of Rotorua. So we look forward to hearing directly from them their feedback on this proposal before making that final decision. So we have a mover and a seconder for the motion. I'll read it one more time. That council approved to go to public consultation from 11th of April to 12th of May based on a proposed rates increase of 7.2%, a capital works program of $141 million and a borrowing of $51 million. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Pardon? Almost. Look, thank you very much, everyone. The only further item on the agenda was the confirmation of minutes in confidential. Because there's only the minutes, if you are all happy with it, we could just confirm those without needing to go into confidential. Fantastic. May I ask for a mover and a seconder? That's moved by Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Wang, that we confirm the confidential minutes of the council meeting held 22nd of March 2023 be confirmed as true and correct. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you. I would like to invite Councillor Waru to close the meeting with the karakia before we declare it closed. Ngā mihi